Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. And we have our Champions League final. Arsenal are out. PSG are through. They will meet Inter in the showpiece in Munich after a 2-1 win for the Parisians in the Parc de France, which made it 3-1 on aggregate. My name's Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me across the water, all the way from San Diego, it's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, I mean, that was all a bit more straightforward tonight, wasn't it? There was maybe a brief moment there where it looked like we might have a proper tie on our hands, but ultimately it was always likely to be an uphill battle for Arsenal. And it turns out that the win in the Bernabeu was the peak of their season in the end. They weren't able to.
Decent peak, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great moment as an Arsenal fan. You've had a great time there, but look, they're not even the best side in England, so it was always a long stretch for them to become the best team in Europe. Obviously, in one-off games, you've got a chance. When you're playing over two legs against these teams, it really is a momentous task to overcome, and monumental task to overcome, I should say. But yeah, it wasn't a momentous occasion in the end. Look, disappointing from an Arsenal perspective that they didn't make more of a game on this, particularly given that they gave it a good shot. But there's absolutely no doubt that PSG deserve to be in this final. They've got a really good chance now of winning this trophy for the first time.
Yeah, 100%. Look, they weathered the early storm. They started to find those moments in transition. And then they took advantage of the opportunities when they came.
It was a complete flip of what I expected, mate. I come in, I was like, right, what I expect first 20 minutes is Arsenal don't need possession of the ball, right? Let PSG have the ball and let them feel like they're in control. Kind of ride that wave. And I did expect PSG to come out on the front foot. And then I thought, right, if Arsenal can get through that first 15 minutes and then they can start to hit them on the break, the game was completely the opposite to that. It was Arsenal who had the ball and PSG who were hitting them on the break.
I've got to say, that's brave. I know I was on the radio today and we were chatting obviously about this game, and I spoke to John Cross, who is a former colleague of yours and the chief football writer at the Mirror. And Harry and I were both in agreement that the idea was just take it easy to begin with and do not let opportunities open up for this PSG side to break on you. I thought that if Arsenal went full, throttle on it early doors, they'd get picked apart. Now, that didn't happen. And I think it's probably worth pointing out that, we talked about a lot of things in these semi-finals. We talked about the fact that if Inter and Barcelona got into a firefight, then I thought the Barcelona would win. And today I thought that if Arsenal started really hot, they would end up, ruining it. Now, obviously, the result hasn't gone in their favour, but those opening 10 minutes were really, really impressive. I think the problem with this game, Dean, and, obviously we come on and discuss all these games in their individuality, is that yesterday was such a high. We came into the podcast exhausted but exhilarated in terms of what we'd seen over the course of that two-legged affair between Inter and Barcelona. And today just felt far more routine, I think, from that perspective. And it doesn't mean it was a bad game, but I would use this analogy. It's like when you go into a pub and you've been really, really, really thirsty for a pint, and you get a pint and it's absolutely unbelievable. That first pint goes down beautifully and you're like, that was unreal. Get me another one. And the second one, you're like, same pint, it's just not as good. Just like, that was the experience of watching this game tonight. You're like, same semi-final, we're just nowhere near the same level of kind of desire and I suppose kind of that swing, that end-to-endness that kind of captivated us all yesterday. This just felt like it was kind of in PSG's hands from the get-go. And look, Donnarumma makes two unbelievable saves. One early on, one that I don't know how much he knows about, where, the ball bounces in the box and Martinelli takes a swing at it and it hits off his knee. And the other, which he knows firmly about, which is the save from Odegaard, who takes that strike from the edge of the box. And at that point, you're like, okay, if Arsenal get this first goal, we've got a game on our hands. And there's always this kind of feeling, I suppose, that have PSG got over the demons of the past? This is a new team. This is a fresh PSG under a new coach who fundamentally believes in cohesion and hard work, and they're nothing like that they used to be. But the scars remain, right? The scars remain from times gone by. We've talked about this in a positive light from kind of Real Madrid's experience and just kind of feeling like they deserve to win it even when they haven't been the best side. But also from a PSG experience, having seen the issues that have plagued them in the past in this competition, you're never quite sure how the crowd, etc., are going to react. But actually, this was a question of just weathering that storm. And the moment that Fabian Ruiz strikes in the opener, I thought it was maybe the best goal of all time. Turns out it's a deflection. I think that moment is kind of like, they're probably through now.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too much doubt about that in most people's minds, I think. And that's probably part of the problem. Who do you count on? Who were Arsenal looking at in that moment, thinking, he's got our back here, he'll get us out of this? Saka's the only one you could say that you would look around and think, he'll get us out of this. He'll come up with something. I think they still miss that 9. I know it's a conversation that's been had 1,000 times. But when you're in a team like that and you're up against it, you've got to believe that there's someone there that will take the half chance, that will take a moment, that will score a penalty, whatever it is, that will get you back in that game. I just think that Arsenal are still lacking that, and I still think that it's something that has plagued them throughout this season. I still think it's one of the biggest mistakes they've made across this season, and I think it was lacking again tonight. Even down to the fact that when Saka misses the chance that he sticks over the bar, right, that is a hard chance, right?
It's tough, isn't it? Because obviously it's got a massive XG on it, etc., etc.,
yeah,
etc.
but ignore all that.
If it goes in, the tie becomes knife edge, right? And suddenly you're like, wow, there's 15 minutes left to play, and this is what's going down. There's one goal in it, the crowd going to get nervous, etc. Like, it's a really tough one to take for Saka and for Arsenal fans, I think.
It is, but if that's not, like, look, Saka was in the right place, blah, 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 and that's great. If that's a world-class number 9, he's anticipating that moment. Saka anticipates the moment. He's in the right spot. That's all fine. But did he truly expect that ball to land at his feet? Because if he did, you're kind of just taking the weight off of that ball, and you just want your foot to be on it, and it goes in. You put anything behind it, it's too fast, it's too rapid, the bounce is too horrible to get it into the net. And I know this is all hindsight. I know in that moment it's very difficult, but an elite striker would have scored that. And Saka, I don't blame him for missing it. But
no, you smother it into the net, right? Like, there's no way that you can, like,
you almost pull your foot away from it. You almost, like, the ball's coming so fast, you almost, like, just want it to touch and pull your foot back, so it just takes the weight off, and it just
has enough time to take a touch if he wants to.
And it's just a horrible one for him, because it looks, people saying Saka misses an open net, and it's like, he has, like, that is a difficult chance, right? But this has been the problem for Arsenal. You've got to take them. They haven't taken their chances. There's the stats are going around now about the XG across the two legs. PSG's was 3.08 and they've scored 3 goals. Arsenal's was 5.1 and they've scored 1 goal. And it comes down to ruthlessness. It comes down to being clinical in your moments. It comes down to those first 10 minutes. And look, if you're Arsenal, were never going to out-football PSG. They were never going to, like, technically outplay this PSG team. But what they did have is a physicality about them and other routes to goal whereby they could overpower them. And if that's set pieces and long throws, then so be it. If that's the way
you need to do to win, right? Like, if they'd gone and won that and it had been 3 goals from long throws, I'm sure there would have been plenty of people online absolutely slamming it and being like, oh, Stoke 2.0. You see the old tropes thrown around all over the place. But if it works, it works. I say this quite a lot about Brentford. I know we're talking about different kind of levels here, but, like, they play really direct transitional football. It's not always that pretty, but it works. You saw it work against Nottingham Forest, where it's 2 long balls over the top that undo them. And if that works for you, that's what you do to get the job done. And Arsenal tried to do that tonight. It just wasn't quite there in terms of the set pieces weren't there when they really needed them to be. And the long throws caused chaos, but there was no one on the end of them. And that ultimately is the kind of the noise around this. That's it. There's no clinicality when it comes to it. And look, we talked last week about the substitutions, right? And the players that come off the bench. Now, Ousmane Dembele doesn't start this game. Doué plays in the kind of middle role. Barcola plays out on the right and Kvaratskhelia nominally out on the left, although obviously they interchange at will. But then Dembele comes off the bench. Gonzalo Ramos comes off on in the second half for a left back in Nuno Mendes, which I thought was pretty interesting. Although Luca Hernandez was obviously already on the pitch, so it was just a kind of switch of formation. But you look at the Arsenal bench, and they switch their fullbacks in Ben White and Ricardo Calafiori coming on for Lewis Skelly and Jurrien Timber, which is fine. You know, perfectly capable players coming on in positions that they know. And the only other change is Trossard for Martinelli, which is a like-for-like swap. You're chasing a game, you need 2 goals in 10 minutes. Like, either you need to switch something up and potentially gamble a bit more and throw an extra player into the midfield. Maybe Trossard comes on and plays, you know, in the number 9 role, or he comes on and plays in the number 10, whatever that looks like. You need to find some more creativity from somewhere. And instead, Arsenal do not have those players to call upon in this moment to make it happen. And that ultimately proves to be the difference, because the chances, you know, as the XG suggests, turn up, but there is no one to stick the ball in the back of the net. And obviously this is quite basic in terms of the analysis. But when it comes down to those kind of moments, when it comes down to a tie like this, and when people are talking about the chances created and all of those things, that's ultimately the answer. Yes, obviously Donnarumma has another good game in the PSG goal, but equally, you have opportunities there to cause a nuisance. You're getting balls into the box with these long throws where the ball is bouncing around all over the place, where there are chances or half chances at the very least being created, and yet the ball is seemingly bouncing to a PSG head to clear every single time. That's where you need someone who's going to be in there, one, who knows exactly what to do, that fox in the box, poacher, whatever you want to call it, to be in and around it to stick the ball in the back of the net. And two, you know, when you're kind of playing a way that allows this, you just are trying to cause chaos, and you have to gamble on that. And it felt like Arsenal never really got there.
Yeah, I mean, look, with Trossard, at least you've got a physicality that Martinelli doesn't quite have. So I respect Trossard for what he brings to the table in that sense. And I think Trossard is a decent squad player, but it's all about levelling up your team. And I think that's, you know, PSG obviously changed the makeup of their team, and the results are paying off very, very quickly. And Arsenal need to level up their squad in the summer and decide exactly what the final identity is going to be of this team, and who are the 3 starters maybe that get them there, because that
maybe 2, but yeah, I don't know. I think you probably want a more dynamic presence on the left-hand side. I think there is a fair point to suggest that Martinelli is someone who
should be a sub.
Has had moments, but hasn't quite reached the potential that we expected him to get to. And that's not to downplay his achievements.
He might still get there. He might still get there, but he needs proper competition from someone who's better than him.
Like, do you go and sign Rodrigo? Do you go and go, right, Real Madrid are moving to a place where Trent is potentially going to be at right back. They're going to probably have to play Fede Valverde out there. Arda Güler has looked really good on that right-hand side. Would Real Madrid be open to selling Rodrigo for 50 to 60 million pounds, maybe 70? I don't know what that figure is, but could you get a deal out of Real Madrid at that point where they're thinking, right, we're making a profit here and we're actually going to be able to reinvest that money? Zubimendi looks like he's going to come in at the base, which I think is an upgrade, although Thomas Partey was good tonight again. But you kind of look at it and think, okay, can you upgrade number 9, maybe a left winger and a centre midfielder? And I think you're probably there. Like, I think you're at a place where you're starting to, you know, find a squad that looks like they can compete on multiple fronts. But that's going to take a serious investment, because you're looking at players who are seriously going to upgrade that. If you're going to pay 60 odd million for Zubimendi, if you were going to pay 70 odd million for a Rodrigo, and then you paid, I don't know, what, 90, 80 for a Šeško, for an Osimhen, whoever that is. Like, that's a significant outlay in a period where Arsenal have already spent a lot of money. Can you go and do that? But if you can, that's the thing that takes you over the line.
And if they don't do that, where do they go? Because they've just had 2 fantastic seasons and ended up with not a lot to show for it. And look, in the fallout from this, they've got 2 very difficult league fixtures coming up now in Liverpool and Newcastle. They might not even finish second in the Premier League. And to have got to this moment,
That's kind of fine. Like,
it's not fine. No, it's not fine. It's not fine to be this good for 2 years and not actually make the most of a Man City downfall season. That is not
sure,
fine.
but like that, the difference between finishing second and third is not taking advantage of that, because that's done and dusted. Liverpool are champions. Like, that's not fine. I agree. Like, Arsenal should have been the ones to step into the breach when City had an off season. I completely agree.
I think finishing 20 odd points off of Liverpool is a massive failure for Arsenal this season. I don't think that if that's how this ends up, which it potentially could be, if Liverpool go and beat them, I think that's criminal in a way, in a season that promised so much for them. That is way off the pace of what it should have been. And again, you can't be competing for the Champions League if you can't win the Premier League. Now, I know that that's changed in recent times, and that people don't have the same consideration that, you know, you dominate English football before you really focus on European football. Like, it's a bit of an old school philosophy, but it took Man City how long to prove themselves and to get to that point where they were ready to go and win the Champions League, and still only narrowly done it. And Arsenal now, they had a good opportunity this season, but we always knew that it was going to be an uphill battle for them to overcome teams of this technical brilliance, and also, you know, over the course of the knockout stages, the experience that they would come up against. That there were so many games that they would have to get through. It was always going to be tough. And I just feel that, like, in a season when Man City have been really poor by their standards and still finish above Arsenal, you've got so far to come over the summer. And that's why they have to go and spend that sort of money to not just play catch up and be ahead of these teams, but to even keep pace with them now. Because we are probably only 1 year away from Saka being tempted to leave Arsenal. And I'm not saying that to annoy Arsenal fans. I'm saying that as a real, like, you have to be realistic in this moment. And I know that Saka, like, will be very like, I'm with Arsenal, I'm this, I'm that. But he deserves...
But even if it's not Saka, you know, you're thinking, what about William Saliba?
What about Saliba? Like, what about Rice? Like, all these players are there to get to the top of their career. And they want to do it at Arsenal. 100%. These lads want to do it at Arsenal, and they are committed to this, and they'll be absolutely gutted right now that they've come up short against a PSG team that they could have beaten. If they weren't that far off it, but they were far off it, if you know what I mean. Like, it's not, they haven't been battered here, but they've kind of been shown up for kind of where they're at. And there's got to be huge growth now in a pretty short space of time again to overcome everybody and to get ahead of them. And I don't know that you can do that without buying, 3 players like the ones that you've talked about, and then hoping that they all kind of hit the ground running, which is very difficult. So, I'm obviously being really harsh on Arsenal here, but I'm being harsh because of the reality is, if they are not harsh upon themselves, they will never get to overcome Man City, Liverpool, to get to the top of the Premier League table and win it, before you get Chelsea coming again, before maybe you get Man United coming again, whoever it is that their investments pay off in 2, 3, 4 years' time, and they're challenging you. It's very, very, very difficult to do these things. But you don't come this far to only come this far, surely. So I'm told Arsenal will spend in the summer. I'm told that they can spend big. Whether they can spend as big enough to go, Rodrigo, Gyökeres and Zubimendi remains to be seen. But it does feel like that is necessary to kind of just raise the elitism of the squad, and then have the other guys that were here tonight backing them up and competing with them.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think it's going to be very interesting to see exactly how this plays out. Like, Arsenal have given a very decent account of themselves tonight. They're denied again by some wonderful stops from Donnarumma.
Like Sommer last night, Donnarumma tonight. Like that has been a telling factor, no doubt about it. I mean, Donnarumma must be 10 feet tall at full stretch. Like, he's unbelievable. Like, he's so hard to beat, and he's so good to have in moments like this. And again, it's coming into a game, looking around you, thinking, do you know what? He's got us tonight. He's got us tonight. You look at each other and you just get that feeling. And whether you're looking at João Neves, who's got that technical brilliance, whether you're looking at Donnarumma, whether you've got Dembele coming off the bench, whether it's Kvaratskhelia, we've even talked about yet, who's one of the best players in the world. You know, these players, you're like, yeah, we've got this tonight. And Arsenal, they trust each other, but are they looking around thinking, yeah, Saka will come up with something, or Dek will do this, or Raya won't let one in tonight? I don't think that they're quite there, and that's the difference between being really, really good and being great.
Yeah, I think so too. Look, I want to come on to the PSG of it all, and we will do that after the break because there's loads to discuss from their performance, which I don't think was at their sparkling best tonight, but they found a way. But just kind of on that, there is, there's always a danger, perennial danger of becoming nearly men, right? And at the moment, I think from that perspective, Arsenal have come on leaps and bounds in the 6.5 years that Mikel Arteta has been at the club. That's also been a long time now. Like this is a project that's had time to mature. And there's absolutely no doubt that Arsenal are so much further along the road than they were. And I'm not trying to talk down on that whatsoever. I think that there is sometimes there's a desire, I think, in football to talk about stuff as, the only thing that matters is trophies, right? Because there is so much more to the game than that. And what has been created at Arsenal, what's been talked about, what's been put forward has changed the idea, I think, and the identity of the fan base and the club. And in terms of where they were to where they are now, coming out of what, people online were calling the banter era and then taking the place to where you're challenging is a huge step in itself. But the hardest step is obviously then getting over the line. And people always talk about this. Managers say it all the time. The first trophy to win is the first one. The hardest trophy to win is the first one. And it just feels like Arsenal are at that point now where they need to go and make a statement next year in order for, the fans who have spent a long time getting behind this and actually coming to a point where the Emirates is a really difficult place to go, where the atmosphere has been raised to levels that I didn't personally think that stadium was going to get to. They have finally made it feel like home and somewhere that they can, be very proud of and very proud to play, etc. I think that Arsenal have got to that point. The next point now is making that final step. And I think that's where it comes to. It's not from any desire to talk down on it. It shouldn't be about Arsenal were dreadful tonight, because they weren't, right? Like they weren't dreadful. They were absolutely fine. But at no real point did I feel, apart from the first 10, 15 minutes, that PSG were in a huge danger of giving this up. And that potentially talks to, yes, the injuries, yes, the fact that they've been kind of decimated to the point where the squad isn't big enough. It wasn't big enough in the first place, right? To deal with the rigors of having to try and win all of these competitions. But I think that this whole point here and what we're talking about in terms of Arsenal comes from that idea that this, and people have been saying this for years, next season's our year, next season's fine, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is now that Arsenal have got to the floor has been raised an incredible amount. Now the question is raising the ceiling, and it's whether they're going to go and make that happen next year or whether this is going to be the point where this project stalls. And I think that that's the question over the summer that a lot of different people at Arsenal have to answer, not least their new sporting director in Andrea Berta, who will have to look at this and be like, okay, how do I put my stamp on this and make sure that this is a squad that gets over the line?
Well, he will do that. And I think that having Berta is definitely something that Arsenal fans can now have optimism about, because it's a different set of eyes and a different list of contacts that you've suddenly got at your disposal to fill those three key positions that we've outlined. And also to take Arsenal beyond the point whereby you've spent £700 million during Mikel Arteta's reign and only got an FA Cup and a Community Shield to show for it. Like that is another reason why this is key. And I do think that it's a positive that they've got Berta in there now to identify and fix that, because it means they've got a chance.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to take a break there. And when we come back, we're going to flip this and talk about the PSG aspect. They are back in a Champions League final. And this time they come in as favourites. Don't go anywhere here on Ranks FC. Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Allo or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks. Welcome back to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks AFC. Jack Collins and Dean Jones alongside you as we take a look back at PSG's win over Arsenal that took them into just their second Champions League final. You remember that they were in the final against Bayern in the COVID year in 2020, a final that took place in August because of the entirely weird circumstances that we all found ourselves in. But they're back there properly this time. Fans, Dean, the fans will absolutely love this. They caused an absolute ruckus at the Parc de France tonight. It was so loud in there. And they come up against an Inter side who are, I think at this point we can admit are slightly flawed. They're a very, very good side, and they have this kind of element of history to defeat and the fact that they will feel like they're righting the wrongs of past years. We talked about all of that on yesterday's episode. But PSG come in as favourites, which they did not do against Bayern in 2020. And I thought it was interesting tonight because PSG were very much not at their sparkling best. Now, Ousmane Dembele did not start this game. He's been recovering from a hamstring injury and was only past fit enough to start on the bench. So they started with a front three of Doué, Barcola and Kvaratskhelia. But it just felt like they were lacking a little bit of bite where they normally have so much. And again, is Achraf Hakimi who comes up with the goods to drive this team onwards. And what they can provide from those fullbacks bombing on is pretty special in a variety of ways. They struggled a little bit to get into the game to begin with, but they felt their way into it and they started playing. And from the moment that Kvara hits the post, I think PSG have really started to get a grip on the game, and the midfield start to take a little bit more control in the center of the park. And that, I think, is what impressed me the most. Now, part of this is you go, okay, well, what do you mean? PSG definitely weren't at their best night. This is not the best we've seen PSG. But even in those circumstances, and even under the cosh a little bit here, they found a way. And that's something we haven't seen with PSG teams of the past.
Yeah, and as you say, you've just described that they've hit the post. They've scored a great goal for Fabian Ruiz. Whether or not it took a deflection, like the touch that takes it away from the defender in itself to get that shot away is absolutely different class. They've missed a penalty. It's a rubbish penalty, and you just.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Vitinha's doing there. I love Vitinha, and I will almost never have a bad word said against him. But that is real not good.
I mean, I know he likes to be smart, and he is smart, but he's been too smart there. Just stick it in the net and be done with it. And next time he's in a moment of such significance, maybe he won't do it, but I wouldn't count on it. He'll probably still try, but. They've still had the biggest moments and they still believe in themselves to carve open those moments. I think it helps that they've got, the fullback battle in the final will be fascinating because they both offer so much from those positions. Perhaps actually it's the best fullback matchup you could have in world football.
Give me Denzel Dumfries against Nuno Mendes in all of my veins for the rest of my life.
Honestly, this is going to be so fascinating because when you're talking about a modern day fullback, you wonder about how they deal with one aspect or the other. Like, are they good enough going forwards or are they good enough going backwards? And with at least three of these that are going to play, I'd say you've got it all. And Federico Di Marco, I'm just too harsh on probably. So potentially all four.
Eddie Di Marco definitely has a bit of it all as well. He had a bit of a tough time in the first leg against Lamine Yamal, but again, who doesn't on some days? So I don't think we're going to hold that against him too much.
How would it deal with Ousmane Dembele is what I would wonder. But it depends what role Dembele plays. Obviously, he might not be up against him because look, Dembele, even when he comes on in this game, right, he's horrible to play against. Because he kind of sees spaces that nobody else can see. In a way that like Messi walks around the pitch and finds those holes. Dembele does find similar holes. He's just not like kind of meandering around in the same way that Messi does, and obviously doesn't have to explode into life like Messi does because he's a bit more fluid. But he'll just drift around into these positions that nobody wants to play in from the other team. Everyone wants to pass him on to somebody else. Nobody wants to go there. And he's an absolute nightmare. So it'll be interesting to see what Inter come up with to deal with that, because Arsenal didn't like it at all. You know, even though his withdrawal was minimalised in the second leg, they didn't like him coming on, and he gave them a huge headache to consider once he was on there. But from an overall outlook here, like this team have just been brilliant to watch. A team that I did not like, almost despised in recent seasons for the way that they were building themselves, for the way that they were marketing themselves. It all felt vulgar to me. Hated it. And to have come this far and turning it around so quickly to the point that my kids are going to be wearing PSG shirts over the summer is miraculous. Like they're such a joy to watch. You're still watching them grow up as a team and some of them as individuals. And when they're flowing, they are just absolutely remarkable. If you think back particularly to the Emirates game and some of the keep ball they were playing, some of the rotations they had going, like, could have made a man weep. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And Arsenal couldn't keep track of it. And there's no doubt, like, over the course of these two games, that you see that they were just playing at a higher level to what Arsenal were. Now, Luis Enrique is a more experienced coach than Mikel Arteta. He's been through a lot. He'll be the people's favourite to go and win it because of what he's been through on a personal level in his life too. And there'll be a lot made of that narrative, I'm sure, and there'll be a lot of emotion attached to this final for him too. And I think people will be, cheering him on from that perspective. But yeah, I think that to have him on the sideline really would have helped PSG come through this as well. I've just really enjoyed it, mate. I just think that from start to finish in the first leg to the end of the second leg, they had just mastered this game. I mean, you text me, we were texting each other before we started recording, and I said, I'm ready to go when you are, basically. And you said, okay, let's let the game finish. And I was like, mate, I've turned it off. Arsenal could play this game 10 times.
I mean, effectively, it was the 94th minute.
It was, but I turned it off in the 84th minute. Like, it was done. Like, it was done. There was no way after what they'd shown that they were going to come out of that game.
You'd think you'd have learned from last night.
No,
you're like
watching
the
the
Inter
same.
fans
This is it.
You're one of the Inter fans that walked out.
Mate, you can walk out on this Arsenal team in a moment like this, that's for sure. And that's why, if you were to rank these teams, obviously you rank them now, and it's quite clear that Arsenal were the fourth best team left in the semi-finals. But I'd say quite considerably so. Unfortunately, and I don't think that is the case. Like, if you judge them player by player, I don't think it's the case that if you judge them as an overall season so far. But if you judge them all on what they've shown us over the two legs, in terms of durability, in terms of invention and craft and making the most of moments, they were always just lacking. And PSG were kind of on the opposite side of that.
They had the weakest punch of anybody.
Yeah.
That was the point I would make, right? Like the Arsenal, and look, that's partly to do with injuries. Again, they had the weakest punch, and I think that when you kind of look at this, you'd say maybe Barcelona had the strongest, but equally they have a bit of a glass jaw at the same time. And PSG feel like the most complete of these units. Now, Inter will run them close on that account because of the way that they're adaptable and what happens with that. But in terms of a side that can just do a bit of everything, you kind of look at the two games that Arsenal have just played, the two ties, right? So They go and they beat a very fragile Real Madrid. Now, that shouldn't take away from the fact that Arsenal went and won at the Bernabeu, which is a bear pit on Champions League nights. And also, this is a Real Madrid team with some of the best players in the world. But I was listening to a variety of podcasts and radio shows, etc., around these. And I was listening to kind of a version of it. I think it was Ian Wright that said it on Wrighty's House. And I love Ian Wright, right? I think he's one of the best pundits out there. But he basically said, well, if you offered the Arsenal team the chance to play against Mbappe, Vinicius and Rodrigo, or you'd ask them to play against Dembele and Doué and Kvaratskhelia, they would pick the PSG three every time. And I was like, well, that's just wrong. Like in terms of what a team, and maybe in terms of individual talents, he's spot on. But in terms of if you're comparing this Real Madrid team to this PSG side, one of these is a team built on individuality, built on moments, etc. And it's what PSG tried to become originally. And the other is an incredibly well-functioning, well-put-together unit that has a team behind them and that know that all of the phases of the game are important, that they have to track back and get into those areas. And you're seeing that now from pretty much all of this team. Now, Kvaratskhelia has always been an incredibly hard worker, right? As a player, we saw it at Napoli. We're now seeing it as PSG. And it's one of the reasons I think that Luis Enrique would have sanctioned bringing him in mid-season because he knew he was going to buy into the ethos of a team that was already set up to do that. You kind of look at that. PSG in many ways are the anti-Real Madrid right now. They have gone away from the model that Real Madrid used to operate within. And I think that model works at times at Real Madrid because they're Real Madrid. It doesn't have the same mythos when you take it to PSG, and it doesn't work in the same way. What this team are is a reflection of a blue-collar manager who has made them realize the importance of hard work and a team ethic in a club that had kind of eschewed that for a long, long time. And I think that that's the difference here. When you said this to, and I absolutely understand why if you'd said to Arsenal fans, you've just beaten Real Madrid, do you think you can beat PSG? They would have said yes. Right? Because you've just beaten the perennial European champions, the holders of the tournament. But I think that ignores the fact of context. I think it ignores the fact that Real Madrid had spent a lot of this season looking like they didn't have the understanding of what was going on, that they didn't understand exactly how to work as a cohesive unit, that the balance of the side had been knocked out of kilter. And the flip side of that is this PSG team, who have kind of gone away from that model and now do fundamentally understand the importance of hard work, who do fundamentally understand exactly what you need to do to make sure that a team is working in the correct order. And that's why I think they come into this final, Dean, as favourites. Now, I don't necessarily want to sit here and preview the final because that'll be an episode in itself when we build up to what will be the showpiece event of European football this year between PSG and Inter in Munich. It's going to be an incredible game, and there's loads and loads of battles to dig into and explore. But I think what we're seeing here from this PSG team is the culmination of a project and the journey they have been on from finishing, what was it, 15th? In the league stage, those early days, the struggles that we saw in this team to begin with, to where they are now is an incredibly positive indictment of everything that Luis Enrique has put together from the sidelines. And this feels like the best coach in Europe right now, or at least the coach who's having the most impact on his squad in Europe, with potentially one of the most talented teams we've ever seen that work as a unit at his disposal.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment, mate. I just get the feeling that this is PSG's time. Tonight, coming into the game, it felt like this had to be Arteta's time. Like this needed to be a big moment for him, and if he could get over this one, then I actually thought Arsenal had a big chance of going on to actually win it. But it was just, now I'm just looking at it and I'm like, this just feels like everything that PSG have done just feels right. And it feels, for me, and this is a bit of a stretch, but it feels a little bit like when Argentina won the World Cup with Messi. Because the way that they stumbled, Argentina came into that World Cup and kind of stumbled. And then they kind of found their feet, and then they kind of created this team harmony, and they bounced back from a little bit of adversity and came
worked
together.
Out the Julian Alvarez thing in the way that PSG have realised that they don't need to operate with a number 9.
Yeah, there are like kind of reflections of that for me in the way that PSG have grown. And obviously every World Cup, there's an expectation that Argentina delivered and they never did. And Messi just was never going to do it. And now with PSG, it's like, are they ever going to do it? And you get to this moment, and look, I hope the final is obviously as good as that one was. But even if it's not, even if we don't get the cracker of a game that we really do deserve after an unbelievable tournament so far, I think the PSG are going to come out on top. I think I kind of want them to as well. I kind of want them to. Like, obviously, I'm neutral and I don't really care. But if I was to kind of hang a flag outside my house for this one, then it would be a Paris one. And I never thought, as I say, I would be sitting here saying this based on how I've battered them throughout the years on this podcast. But because they've had such a complete turnaround in team identity, because they've been so entertaining, they've been so fun to watch. They reflect everything you want to see now in modern football, really. Maybe not everything, because look, there's still money involved, and people will still.
Yeah, they still spent a lot of money, and so have everyone. Yeah. Inter maybe are a slight discrepancy in this, but they've done it in a slightly different way. Inter.
And if you're a traditionalist, maybe you do still want Inter to win it. Maybe you want them to defend and win 1-0. That's fine. Everybody has their own preferences to how they want to win this. I would just like, on the back of like a mesmerising Champions League campaign, to see PSG go into that final and just mesmerise us. And I think it's possible. I think it's really possible that this team, with that midfield and the way that they can, the balance of that midfield, they've just got it so right. And it's going to be an incredibly intriguing matchup, as you say, and we'll go through it all at some point before we get to it. But for me, this is it. PSG are the favourites, but they're favourites for a reason, and I believe they can live up to it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you can make a compelling narrative case for both sides in this final, right? Like the Francesco Acerbi story is incredible. The fact that Inter will feel that they have wrongs to right, etc. And then you can flip that and talk about Luis Enrique's story and talk about this kind of youth core that he's brought through at PSG, their fearlessness, etc. I think you can do both of those, and in fact, we will in weeks to come. We will dig into all of those. You talk about the midfield there, and I've been singing this all year long, right? The Vitinha and João Neves, the little Portuguese princes, and then the kind of senior figure in Fabian Ruiz, who comes up trumps tonight. But I thought João Neves was absolutely sensational. I thought Vitinha actually had a relatively quiet game. Take the missed penalty aside, there wasn't a game that he could dictate and control in the way that we've seen. But João Neves is an N'Golo Kante regen. Like, it's unbelievable the amount of work he gets through. It's unbelievable the physicality that he has in a relatively small frame. It's unbelievable the way that he puts himself about and kind of contributes in both phases of the game, but both ends of the field as well. Just, when you buy a player from Benfica, and look, we spoke a lot about João Neves, right? And I'd watched a fair bit of him at Seychelles, and there was always something very, very special about his ability to just get in there and make things happen. But there are risks when you buy a player from Benfica, right? Because some players make that step up and become world beaters. We've seen a number of them down the years, but I'd say no more than Bernardo Silva. But there are also players that come out of there and just don't look like the same player whatsoever in any shape or form when they move into a different place. Now, I think Enzo Fernandez has really moved forward in this year and he looks pretty good now, but Gonzalo Ramos has not been a major first season success, especially coming off the back of a tournament where he did so well. You look at someone like a Darwin Núñez, who has struggled, I think, generally over the course of his time at Liverpool. Yes, some incredible moments, but I think it's been more low than high. You think back to Renato Sanches, who was bought for big money and then ended up at Swansea on loan and then had a brief renaissance in Liga, but ultimately fell short, I think, of the expectations for him. You go and spend 50, 60 million pound on a player at Seychelles, and there is always that element of risk. They're not going to bounce up. But this one has paid off so handsomely. Yeah. And pairing him with Vitinha has been a masterstroke. And both of them look to Fabian Ruiz as their kind of mentor figure in that midfield and the balance of it. And, Luis Enrique has made some bold decisions as well. The absolute golden boy at PSG was Warren Zaire-Emery, right?
Yep.
Like he was the one who everyone was talking about. He was supposed to be the academy star who made it through. And he's been sidelined by the brilliance of this midfield. That takes a lot of guts.
Yeah, that's true.
Considering how loved he is by the ultras. And yet, look at the rewards it's taken. That doesn't mean that Warren Zaire-Emery won't walk into this midfield at some point and be like, oh, by the way, I'm here too. I've got a point to prove. But right now, he's having to bide his time and work for it. And there have been some big names that have been sidelined here. And ultimately, Luis Enrique has managed this squad to almost perfection.
Yeah, absolutely that. I just wanted to point out too, by the way, that I was kind of glad that Vitinha missed his penalty because I thought it was a harsh give from the ref, and I feel
it's one of those ones that only gets given in Europe, doesn't it? It just does't get given in the Premier League.
And I really feel for Luis Skelly, and because he's been through so many moments this season.
He was really, really good again tonight.
Like,
really good.
This lad is so good, and he's had to go through so much in this like transitional period of his career and his life. And he's had, the red cards against him. He's had big moments go against him. And he just seems so unfazed by it and unable to take it on his shoulders. But I'm glad that wasn't the goal that completely knocked Arsenal out of the Champions League, because it was a harsh give, and I just didn't want Luis Skelly to be the one that had kind of cost them ultimately their place in the competition. So that was at least some relief. And they still had a lifeline in that moment. And that was the time when I thought, right, come on then. Who's the man? Is it Saka? Can you get to him? And can you salvage your place in this tournament? And it just wasn't to be. So Arsenal fans, I'm sorry if you think I've been too harsh on this show. It's just that there are levels that need to be reached now. And I could already see on my phone the narrative opening up about Arteta, and that people are already pointing out like how many years it is since he won a trophy, and like has he taken them as far as he can, and all this sort of thing. And that will be the story that follows in.
I don't buy that
voice, and I don't think Arsenal will either. I'm sure he'll be there. I don't think there's an obvious solution as someone that could just step in and take over and lead this team forward. So that won't happen. But yeah, you've seen now again what it takes, both domestically and in Europe, to be at the top. It's only one team can get there in the Europe. Only one team can get there in England, and people are always disappointed.
Plays a part in the Champions League, right? Like I think over a league season, the best team pretty much always wins the league over 38 games, right? Like it's as simple as that. I think in Europe there can be strokes of luck, etc. But there is I think there can be an overwhelming frustration around how that's played out. One of the things that we talked about Miles Lewis-Skelly there, and I was like, he had a really good game. Thinking about it, I'm like, Saliba had a pretty good game as well. Actually, Jurrien Timber, was pretty good over the course of it. I don't think Jakub Kiwior did much wrong. I look at this Arsenal team and I'm looking at it and saying, who wasn't great? I don't think Martinelli was particularly good. I didn't think Marino got into the game at all, but equally he's playing out of position as a centre forward, and there wasn't particularly loads of service for him either. But, apart from that, I'm looking at it and thinking Arsenal were pretty good across the board, right? And still, PSG, without Dembele, find a way to score 2 goals in this game. All right, fine. The first one takes a deflection. The second one's a wonderful finish from Hakimi. You kind of look at that and they miss a penalty and they hit the post. And even on a relatively quiet day for PSG, and look, the XG battle is the XG battle, I get it. And someone will be like, yeah, but look at the chances that Arsenal missed, fine. But I mean that on a quiet day where Arsenal played really well, they've still managed to score twice, miss a penalty, hit the post, and go through on an aggregate scoreline. I think that speaks to how good PSG are as much as it speaks to what the game was tonight.
Yeah, I think beyond that, Arsenal needed somebody that was going to be excellent. You had to have a couple of players that excelled in a game like that, or did something out of nothing, and that didn't really happen either. Which probably was needed in a game like that. So yeah, I don't think anyone was like super disappointing particularly. I just also felt that like you need a game changer. You need
a lot of 7 out of 10s, not many 9 out of 10s.
Yeah, I mean there was a few 7 out of 10s, a load of 6s, and a couple of 5s. If I was to do it off the top of my head, and that
taking you back to your tabloid days now.
It does, and I mean I hated doing player ratings. It was the thing I really really hated on a weekly basis of my old job. But that's where my mind straight away is going, and it couldn't be that way. If you were going to see off PSG tonight, you needed a 9, some 8s, you could probably afford 1 6, and you needed 7s. And they weren't there tonight. They just didn't quite get to that level that they suggested. You know, again, go back to the first 10 minutes, there was signs of it, but yeah, the way that it then opened up just meant it wasn't to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we have a PSG Inter final and both worthy finalists at that after coming out on top of their semi-finals. I think we will leave it there for today's Champions League takeaway. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Thank you to everybody who's listened to the last 2 days of analysis. It's been quite a roller coaster ride, hasn't it? Tonight was a bit smoother. We were able to kind of take it in our stride a little bit more probably as we watched the games and thought about what we were going to talk about. But yeah, thanks.
I did less screaming tonight. I screamed a lot last night, like walking around my room just shouting.
Yeah, and obviously that's it. Like in terms of the midweeks, that's it. You know, the final will be on a weekend, so that's it for our midweek Champions League watching for another season. So
this is the last Champions League takeaway,
yes,
indeed. And we will not have one. We'll have obviously an episode looking back at the Champions League final, but that will come out.
What an emotional day! What an emotional day! The last Champions League takeaway of the season. We've indulged on it at least. We've enjoyed it, and yeah, cheers, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who, shouted at us and gave us this idea to flip the Tuesday show to a Champions League takeaway on Champions League nights. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea and people have missed the main episodes at times, but we thought it was good to get them out in terms of talking fresh about the games that have just happened. We'll have a think about that over the summer and see exactly how it's going to play out going forward. But for now, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening and tuning in over the course of this season. There will be another episode on this main feed this week. Doogie and Sam are talking about Hansi Flick and the job he's done at Barcelona in the light of them being knocked out by Inter yesterday and where this team have got to. So make sure you're tuned in on Friday for that. But from Dean and I, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all very shortly. Take it easy, Rank Squad. Peace. Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Allo or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.